2, 3.
For Columbus Network is a relationally driven, very diverse community of pastors, of marketplace leaders, of nonprofit directors working together to really make impact in a neighborhood or around a cause in the city. Let's start by talking about the formation of the West Side Network. So Ben, maybe you could kick us off. How would you guys describe Hilltop in general?
It's got a bad reputation. I guess it's the first thing I think of. I think there's a lot of people in pain, a lot of generational baggage. If you grow up in trauma, your kids will grow up in trauma. And you absolutely see it here, that parents that don't want their kids to grow up like they grew up, their kids grow up just like they grew up. There's so much potential in the Hilltop, and then there's so much potential that doesn't get realized because people can't see past their immediate context of problems. And so it's like, you're like, come on, you can do this. You can get past this. And they're like, I can't. I just can't.
Phil, what do you see?
Yeah, no, that was a great recap. I think the way that I would describe the Hilltop is beautiful yet complex. It's diverse, and but there's also a collective proudness. There's a lot of people,
Grit.
There's a grit. There's a determination of survival.
Yeah.
That which comes from that pain. Like, we want to survive.
Can you describe how this group of leaders started meeting together, how you started organizing that and developing what is now a really strong network?
Really what was the catalyst that kind of started to form us was finding a shared need, a shared thing that we needed to work together on. And so in 2020, after George Floyd's death, we really saw a need for prayer for racial healing in our neighborhood, and so we gathered together to talk about what would that look like.
It's been fascinating to see the seasons of our culture that have been going on while seeing this group start forming together, this network of Christian leaders. Maybe kind of walk us through some of those seasons and some of the direct connections you've made that kind of allude to what you talked about.
It felt so good to have churches from the Hilltop and from Franklinton together, Christians from different walks of life, different viewpoints together. And right after we finished, it was like, okay, God, what's next? And so the next thing that we jumped into were learning centers. We were in the learning centers. Now you're recognizing how far behind kids are. I just knew the next thing we need to do is start a school. When we got the churches together again then, it was like incredible. We had 16 churches. We had churches that have never come before and that never came after, but they came because they cared about kids' education and they felt this burden for the kids in our neighborhood to have the opportunity to decide where they go to school.
It can be hard to work together. And so the fact that God has led us to a place where we have a room full of, there's probably 12, 15 churches at this point who are all excited about working together. It's just an incredible joy. We can become territorial as churches sometimes, and we think somehow, we're competing. But the reality is, by God's grace for us, it kind of bled out of necessity. We really needed to work together if we were going to see impact. But I think any neighborhood can learn that there is a true joy in working together and collaborating with one another. You're able to get more done, and they'll know we are Christians by our love for one another. And so we could do it alone. but how much more beautiful it is and how much more joy it is to work together.
For a lot of years, it's like, man, I want to plant a church, I want to plant a church, I want to plant a church. But what if God's not calling you to plant necessarily a church, but a collaborative ministry that reaches somebody new that nobody else could reach because a church couldn't reach them, but maybe a school could, maybe a learning center could, maybe a prayer walk could. Maybe there's something else that God's birthing, and I don't know what it'll be. But there's this kingdom work, and when we're doing it across denominational silos, the people in our church start thinking bigger. The people that we're impacting in the community say, hey, what's going on? And so it gives us a voice to love people and to speak the truth of the gospel. But it comes out of sacrificial collaboration.
Yeah, it's interesting how denominations and networks have evolved in a way where, because they are so big and national generally, it's really easy for a leader to say, I'm going to find my relationships outside of another city or something beyond, and miss a huge opportunity to reach, go across the street to another church and really build that friendship with a pastor. I think that requires, like, as you guys have said, a lot of just giving more glory to God and less to your own church or less to your own personal platform that you might be trying to build, which is a huge obstacle.
The next step, I think, for us is going to be working together in outreach this summer. That's what we're looking at, because our neighborhood needs it so bad.
God's love for us is never meant to just be kept to ourselves. And so that love that we have for one another is now going to flow out into the neighborhood. And the more we work together, the more we're unified, the more of an impact that's going to have.
Yeah, I think of the body in the cell, right? Like if a church is a cell, it takes a whole bunch of churches together to make a finger, a whole bunch of churches to make a hand. But when we work together, we're launching out things that would be impossible for one church to do.
I think what we're talking about is more than just collaborating on a surface level of just getting stuff done, but we're talking about a spiritual collaboration that is reflective of John 17, that Jesus is praying over us, that we would be one as he and the Father are one, so that the world would believe. And I think one of my biggest prayers and one of the biggest efforts that I want to see for Columbus really engage in is, how do we take this model and scale it across the city into all kinds of different neighborhoods that have their own unique challenges, that have their own unique relational dynamics on the east side and downtown and south side and New Albany.
You'll quickly realize how much people want to be about this sort of missional-minded kingdom building in our city.
Man, we want the whole city to be working together.